Hello, this is Benjamin, alias Sexy Voice, and he knows it, Boyce, and welcome to the Voice of Reason podcast. Today's guest is Zachary Schwartz, who is an author stationed somewhere in New York City, or Brooklyn, as he calls it. Zachary has recently launched Counter, which has a funny spelling, and you can find that in the description. It's a really fun, zany kind of journalist website that's modeled on what Vice used to be before it became what Vice is now. In this conversation, we talk about the woke hegemony as it affected journalism. He has been a journalist for a number of years now, and also that is creeping into the corporate climes and also erupting in the streets around us. Every once in a while you talk to somebody, you feel like you've been friends for a long time, and this is that kind of guy for me. So it was great to have him on. Definitely check out his website and I guess strap on in for this fascinating conversation about woke doctrine and what we're supposed to be doing about it if we can do anything at this point in history. Here's Zach. Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Thanks for being willing to chat with me.
Yeah, for sure. Where are you based?
I'm in Olympia, Washington, which is south of Seattle, north of Portland, I guess, war zones at the time being or something.
I was actually, I was supposed to go there this weekend.
Really?
Yeah, because, I was supposed to go there. I think that the Seattle basically took down the area because they knew that basically so many people were descending. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you were going to go to visit the Chaz?
Yeah. I was trying to do, it's a long story, but I kind of know the guy who created the original event that they then took down, and then the event got co-opted by much farther extremists. So I was going to go do something with that guy, and then he pulled out because he was like, this is just going to turn into such a bad situation. So
yeah, totally. And then down in Portland, they've had a week or two of just nightly protests, and things got really rowdy last night.
Jeez.
Where are you at?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay. How are things there?
They're definitely degenerating and have been degenerating for a while, even before all the George Floyd protests. But outside my block is where the two cops got shot. Every single night there's fireworks. At the beginning, a lot of people would open their windows and scream shut up or stop doing the fireworks. And I saw how someone did that, and the person who's shooting the fireworks aimed the firework into their window and shot it. So no one says shut up anymore. It's funny because the same exact place where all the fireworks used to be shot, all the fireworks are being shot off. There used to be a cop car there all night, but there's not that anymore. I mean, for whatever reason, just fireworks are just, I didn't even want to see fireworks. I was just so tired of them.
Oh, geez. It's like a war zone then.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of a LARPing.
Yeah, that's the word I would use is even with the Chaz and the Chop. What I was thinking this weekend, because I was talking to dude and he was because all these white nationalists are going to come. So he's first we're going to have to fight them off. We're going to have to fight the Nazis and then run up the hill and defeat the commies. And it's this is all, I mean, he's a cool dude, but just everything that's happening, it's all just a LARP of 20th century conflicts.
Yeah. Where do you think it's going to head? Do you think it's just going to keep on getting more and more escalated, or they're going to run out of steam?
Oh, I think what's going to happen later this year is the election, because the election I think is actually going to end up maybe being the biggest thing for America. I think if Trump wins, the quote unquote radical left, however people want to describe it, is going to basically say look, we can't change things at the ballot. We've already shown that we can get away with basically causing a ton of destruction. Now is the time of we're actually going to cause the destruction of America now. So I think if Trump wins, it's full on. I think it's been information civil war. I think it might be full on kinetic civil war. Maybe not as formal as North versus South, but just years of rioting. Definitely looting will happen again because people will just be so frustrated. And then if Trump, I think, loses, he might, he might say oh, it's rigged, and then we're gonna have a constitutional crisis, and yeah. So either way, it's just gonna end really badly.
What would you What do you think would happen if Biden wins? Or Kanye, I guess, if we want to go there.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I was saying is if Biden wins, I think Trump might say that it was rigged and that there was some sort of cheating or something like that, and then just stall the result.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if Biden gets into power, what do you perceive would be the outcome of that?
Oh, I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot. I don't know. It's so weird. It's like, because I feel like the left right now is, it's funny because there was like the Bernie Sanders left, which it kind of didn't seem like it, but Bernie Sanders was in a way like sort of anti-woke, anti-identity politics, like really focused on like economic class issues, like I think a way of like the old left. Whereas I think Biden winning, Hillary winning, and I think even the way that this sort of revolution is taking is it is sort of that like corporate wokeness. It's like basically preserving the elite, basically preserving the corporate elite, but just like now you have to signal and be woke. And you know what I'm saying? It's like it seems like the direction of the left is taking just like the superficial identity, like aesthetic route completely while preserving the same system. Like, yeah. And then, yeah, the right, I think, is taking like a populist direction, but I don't know. I don't think either one is necessarily great.
What is your take on corporate wokeness then? What do you think is beyond the shallowness and the preservation of the hierarchy, the real hierarchy? Like, what do you think is the outcome of that ideology?
I think this dystopia, honestly, it's like not the real revolution. Like, I think the real revolution would be like, I mean, even right now, like, it's like there's such a moment, I think, for like people to come together and pass like a bill, like the way in the 60s it was like we passed landmark legislation. Like if people want to reform the police or even like defund the police, that window's open right now for like, not to like necessarily abolish them, although I think you could even try that at a local state level, like try it, see what works. But just for like massive, like, you know, let's say we take a little bit of money away from the police, we might personally compensate them more to like just all these different things, like basically increase the amount of budgeting for training, demilitarize them a little bit. All these things are like windows that are open now that Trump or the Democrats could seize, and I don't really see them being seized. But in regards to corporate wokeness, I mean that is like a scary route. I think the natural conclusion of where like the like leftist cultural revolution goes. I think it's like terrifying. I mean, like. So my background is I'm half Taiwanese, and I mean, and both my parents, my dad was in China for 10 years right after the Cultural Revolution. In my parents
70s then or 80s?
I think late 70s.
Okay, yeah.
My dad's older. I don't want to call him old, but he is definitely older. He had kids when he was much older. Both my parents are like very, very liberal, like democratic socialist liberal, and they are scared. I mean, they see what's going on. They're just like, this is terrifying, and this isn't the direction we should be going in as a country. And I think Biden, I respect what he did, like in the Obama presidency, but I don't think he really has I don't think he even has like a real ideology. I think maybe he did once, but now it's just like totally just everything is just swept up in this. Like, I feel like Twitter is dictating the direction of the Democratic Party.
Jeez. Could there be a worse way to direct the direction of a political party?
Right? Just like, yeah, it's just totally focused on like just this most superficial, like smallest things, not like real structural change. But
yeah. So your trajectory, there's a couple of pretty interesting things that we could suss out here, because you were involved in like new media when it was the new media, right? That's what Keiko said. Yeah. And did that converge with social media? So you've been involved in media when kind of social media became prominent. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, for sure. So like my background is I was a feature writer for like Vice, wrote features for Playboy, Rolling Stone. I like worked at Genius. So this is like, and this is when I was in college. So this is like early 2000s, late 2000s Brooklyn media, which was definitely an era. And yeah, so I was working like my like journalism school, because I never took a journalism class like in college or anything like that, was basically freelancing for Vice. I didn't work in the newsroom, but I did so many features for them and all that stuff, and just worked with editors that I think I really got a idea of what old Vice was about. Or I mean, it wasn't that old of Vice, but it was definitely like peak Vice.
And how did that shape the discourse, or what was the like public political discourse at that moment?
I think we were beginning to get into like cancel culture. Like when I was in college, I came in like very, I think, ideological in a lot of ways.
In which direction?
Left, for sure. Like super left. And I mean, when I went to college, like and then I know this is a little bit different than the media thing, but it's kind of like what I started to see is like, you know, the marching band is like, again, like at Columbia is just like super liberal, whatever. And I saw like, you know, a bunch of kids I knew like basically like put black tape on their mouth and like locked arms and like prevented the marching band from like entering this library. Which I was like, this is a LARP of like a 60s thing over like a problem that is like, what do you like, this is like, and I also knew a lot of those kids were personally like extremely wealthy and like very sheltered. And I was like, and then you guys are like locking arms, like violently not letting the marching band, which is the goofiest, like diverse liberal group on campus. So anyway, so I'm going on a tangent because I know you asked about media, but basically that was when I started to see those kind of things. But at the time, no, I would say Vice was actually like pretty brave. It definitely, they did things that would be considered offensive now.
Yeah, so, offensive in a certain direction because they're always edgy, but it seems like they adopted a particular morality that they're edgy towards or edgy with. Yeah, they shifted in terms of who they're willing to offend. Because now I see stuff like Vice is like, you know, I saw some article of like why we need to deconstruct the family, like the family is toxic for people, like the two parent. I mean, maybe they would have done that 10 years ago, but I don't think that was their focus. I think back then their focus was on sort of even like, I think people forget that Vice was conservative punk for a long time. Like, you know, are you familiar with like Gavin McInnes? Yeah. So kind of, yeah. They've wiped him from their site, but Gavin McInnes like was the Vice voice, and Gavin McInnes has always been conservative punk, like very anti-PC culture, and I think Vice in the 2000s, like even that's what Sarah Silverman said, is she was like their anti-PC culture, but somewhere like along the way, and I think that, you know, I have a lot of things to say about this, but they hit critical mass of like millennials, and then they basically just had to convert to wokeness. Oh, okay. So, in one way of looking at things, it's not necessarily like the corporate overlords saying that they can manipulate media. It's that there's a certain audience base that wants certain content and wants their morality reified in their media. Yeah, maybe. I think it's so, I mean, obviously I'm just one person, like it's just one eye, but I think it's both top down and bottom up. Yeah. So what happened? Because Vice at this point is indistinguishable from Vox or Medium or BuzzFeed. It's like literally all new media is basically the same publication. And if you look at the same, like the people who work there, they work at Vice one year, then they work at Vox one year, then they might eventually move up to New York Times. But these places all take the same editorial line. All new media is the same political orientation. What is their purpose, or like what change do they want to affect in the world, broadly speaking? Probably, I can't say, but I would imagine, I mean, I think that in a lot of these organizations, you almost have to like kowtow to the most sensitive member. So whatever, like, or sensitive viewpoint. So there's like the, and I'm not even talking about Vice, but like this, and this kind of goes into like, this might sound like a little like out there. But like ideologically, I mean, there's just, I think it's just ideology. Actually, I want to actually like stop it at that. Is I think that there's definitely an ideology, that these people want to push. And I think that's probably true for like most things, but, I just know, all media is indistinguishable from each other. All new media is like the same editorial stance at this point, which is troubling, right? Yeah. Well, so you were working for these various different outlets, and then I was led to believe that you were like, I don't like the direction that this is heading. Is that correct? Yeah. Why? Definitely. What was that about? What did you see, and what did you want or not want? So I was pitching. I just was running up against stuff where I was like, you guys are this. I'm not even talking about Vice. I just mean in general. Like,
I would just be like, you guys are this scared to cover this thing, or like if I want to write about a men's movement, right, that seems to be helping people. Let's say, are you familiar with NoFap?
Yeah.
Okay, so NoFap helps a ton of people. If we want to talk about like its origins, its mystical origins, it's like found in Taoism, every religion. People of color like lead many aspects of the NoFap movement, especially like semen retention, right? And it helps people's lives. I mean, people have lived experiences where it's like it's helped my whole life. If I was to pitch something about NoFap to any of those publications, and I know this for a fact because this happened, I have to write it in a way that what's the word? That debunks it. Okay, so there's a lot of things there. Is that like this is a men's movement, right? These organizations are so scared to take a positive attitude or a non-skeptical attitude towards any movement that's like a men's movement, that they're basically just like, you have to debunk it. And if you actually go and look at the articles about NoFap that have been written by these places, they don't interview a single person from the movement. They only interview people who basically confirm this assertion that they have, this assumption that they have, that it's a men's movement, therefore it's connected to the far right. So it's basically just connected to this like sort of Nazi hysteria. Like everything just ends up leading back to like the Russians or the Nazis for these people. And you can't write about anything like interesting unless it basically goes in with like a corporate woke agenda. And I think that I'll leave it at that.
No, continue.
I mean, and I don't want to say it's all corporate wokeness, because I know there's legitimate people, like legitimate leftists in this organization. And when I say that, I'm not a leftist myself. I'm totally independent. I hate labels. I think that they like sort of like shunt us into like thinking we have to be something. Even if you say I'm centrist, independent, it's all whatever. I mean, there's certainly like people who aren't into this, but I just think that like at this point, like when any organization reaches a critical mass of like millennials that are like left-leaning enough, at one point it just totally has to give over to like the Robin DiAngelo, like white fragility zone, or else they're going to get sued, or there's going to be someone go public about it. These places aren't fun. Actually, I've never worked in a newsroom, so I can't say. But all the punk spirit that at least I grew up with, millennials don't have. Millennials do not have punk spirit. And I don't mean not all millennials, but this sort of like, and I've written about this before, like when we were kids, we were like, oh, like we want to like go wild out and like just say crazy things, has now turned into like HR shaming and like you shouldn't like do this around the workplace, or like you shouldn't, it's so unprofessional. And I'm not talking about like Me Too stuff, because that's a whole different thing. And obviously respect, when if legitimate things, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. There's so much to say here that I could just keep going on and on. So
yeah, it seems like this generation, or the dominant aspect of the millennial generation, is rebooted Puritanism. It seems like.
Yeah, definitely.
Or I think of it as like kind of like the 1920s, where we're going to have a prohibition, and instead of liquor being banned, it's going to be free thought. In a way, it's going to be open discourse. How do we contain that? How do we deal with that? How do we confront it? How have you gone your own way, or wrestled with it?
Well, first of all, I think that Puritan is actually the exact right word. I've actually used that word when I was writing about this documentary TFW No GF, which is like it's a great documentary by Alex Lee Moyer. It's about people call it an incel documentary, although it's like much more than that. I would recommend anyone like Googling it. Oh, but so yeah, I've used that word Puritan is funny because in the 2000s, I feel like the Puritans were like the right, they're establishment right. And these are the same people who were like, these video games might cause violence. These movies might cause violence. Marilyn Manson causes violence. Ban it all, right? And we were kids and we were like, wow, these adults like suck. Like we hate these people. It's so funny because in 2019, 2020, you have people being like, oh, the Joker might cause violence. Ban it. I don't know about this book or this video game that endorses this. Ban it. I've literally seen that. It's like you saw it in the Joker. It's like these people became the people that they swore to never grow up as and to never grow up to be. And I think that like to fight it. And I was talking to someone like this because it does kind of seem like we're in like really bad times. But I was like, I think it's like the test of every generation to like speak the truth. And I think that like I was, talking with someone, I was like, I think in every generation it seemed like the world was ending, that everything was crumbling around them. Like '60s obviously was one thing. In the '70s and '80s, the Cold War and sort of the threat of nuclear annihilation was such a severe psychic anxiety for so many people that it probably seemed impossible to do anything as well. Like, why would I have a future when we could just get into a nuclear war? After 9/11, it seemed like a really bad time for the world. So I think that just like, and that kind of leads me to what I started is, I'm the editor in chief. I helped found a new magazine called Counter Magazine, and it's Counter with an E, so COUNTERE magazine, just counter.com. But it's basically our way, like me and like a few other journalists who kind of came from the ranks of like freelancing for Rolling Stone, Vox, who were disgusted with the state of the mainstream media, to basically speak our truth. And I think that's just what's really important, is for people to stand up what's right. I think it's like the test of every generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And how does one become a media maker now? I stumbled into media making myself just because I was handed about 500 hours of delicious madness footage that I've been assembling into a documentary. And then all of a sudden I realized that there's this whole independent media universe that is constantly under threat of being annihilated by the corporate overlords that are kind of playing with it. But how do you become a media maker? What is your parameters now? And how do you make that something that's viable for you to do?
It's hard for me to say, like, in terms of being like truly successful at it. I mean, I've definitely been successful as a freelance feature writer. And we started the magazine like 3 months ago. So we're just starting out. We're growing. I mean, we're getting a lot of hits and we're growing fast. But I think, I think just kind of like knowing what you want to say and I think it seems really important to have your own platform. I mean, I think that's why it's cool. I think that's why it's cool what you're doing. What we're doing, it's just, especially now more than ever, I think that people really need to like do their own things, because the institutions have like totally failed us.
Yeah. And how do you, I guess, set yourself up for not being canceled or mobbed in a way, or taken down by the MasterCard or whatever?
I think about that. And I think that with like the MasterCard stuff, like the true demonetization, when like they truly come for you, I think that's really like, you truly have to build your own platform and go your own way. I've thought a lot about that recently, because no one is impervious to cancellation. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a person of color. It doesn't matter if you're straight, LGBTQ, like anything like that. Like, did you see that story in Utah where like that yoga studio was canceled? This is a yoga studio that literally, it was donation based only. So anyone could come in. You could pay $1. It was loved in the Colorado area. And they even it was a white founder, but he had nights where no white people were allowed. It was only POC doing yoga, and they got canceled. And they got canceled for, I don't even know what it was, but a lot of people not. So basically what it just shows, that even if you go by sort of like, you try to adhere to like the woke hegemony, or whatever that, orthodoxy, you will still get canceled. And it doesn't, and I've had friends who are like, any race, any orientation, like in top of the intersectional period, and you can still get canceled. So I've just thought, like, listen, like, what I know I don't want to do is, I'm not going to build my house upon these people. Like, I'm not going to build my house in a way, obviously, like, anyone could get attacked at any time, but I think it's really smart nowadays to not build your house and not build your audience upon the sort of like the punishers, the people who because that's not our audience. Like, even with Counter, it's like, that's not our audience at all. And I think anyone site, like, you can see like there's things in there that are definitely like, I mean, there's a lot of like different thoughts. It's definitely a heterodox site.
It's fun stuff too. All things considered, it's a really fun site.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, stuff like, I ate the favorite foods of Trump, Putin, Kim Jong-un. Our last one last week was like, we played the 6ix9ine out loud in Brooklyn. It's like, so it's not, we're not a political, we're cultural, but we're like, we're nonpartisan cultural magazine, but we're seeking to tell the truth and be fair. So
okay. So 2020 has been really crazy. Have you despaired or maintained hope, and how have you managed your reaction to what's going on, COVID, and then the riotous activity that's been following?
Yeah. Well, everyone was saying in the beginning of the year, like 2020 is still our year, or no, is our year, right? Everyone was like, oh, 2020 is going to be our year, like January 1st. But I still think that's possible. I mean,
what do you mean by our year? Whose year? Our year?
Like just like people were just like, oh, 2020 is going to be our year. Like, we're going to like get gains and like we're going to like take over 2020. Like, I'm going to become my best self in 2020. And then like 2 days into it, that was like when we like attacked Iran or killed a general, and then Corona. And so sort of people are like, okay, 2020 wasn't our year. But I really still think like for the boys, whatever, girls, anyone, like it's still our year. Like, we can get healthy, we can get fit. I mean, I during quarantine, if the quarantine didn't happen, I wouldn't have started the magazine, because it gave me, because I lost all my freelance opportunities. And I was like, okay, well, like, no place is accepting pitches. Like, and I've just been fed up for a while, and kind of like, so I was like, let me start this. So it's definitely an opportunity. But yeah, I think that even like as the world is like sort of burning, it's just like, I don't know, if we can really only focus on ourselves and be healthy and speak truth and just like not be afraid of the punishers, we can thrive, you know?
Do you think that the racial tensions that are being released right now or expressed right now, do you think that they're going to lead to actual reform, or will it just be completely commandeered by ruffians and radicals and then the corporate elite?
Okay. Honestly, I don't know. The sad thing is, I think the current president could rally people around, and he could approach it differently, because he could have the Republicans on his side and he could get enough Democrats to do something. I don't think that that's really what he's doing. So
what do you perceive Trump doing then, being up to? Do you think that he has a plan, or do you think he's just so reactive?
I mean, it's like, I mean, this is someone who could still like feasibly, I mean, maybe not with the Democrats, but like in, you know, whatever, someone who could pass infrastructure, who could have basically passed a lot of bills. And with that July 4th address yesterday, it seemed like he was sort of digging into his side.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I feel like he's basically sinking down. He's giving them what they want, and they give him what they want. And these two sides are just feeding off each other and like spiraling. And it's like two hawks, like, you know what I'm saying? Like caught in the air, and they're just like, and they're wrestling with each other, but they're both just descending. It would be hard for him, but I really think that, I don't know, he could have, you know, he could have done this in like a way that sort of tried to unify everyone, whereas I feel like he takes the bait, and they take the bait too, and they just take the bait for each other. Yeah. But they're two sides of the same coin to me.
A lot of people are feeling very isolated by what's going on, and on social media, like when the Black Lives Matter protests started up, at least in the younger generation, there was a lot of crazy policing with regards to, you know, did you post the right thing? Are you really a racist? Are you not a racist? Are you on our side? So there's that playing out on the kind of the younger generation level. And then in a lot of institutions are implementing this D'Angelo kind of totally crazy, incredibly racist, anti-racist dogma. And it really forces people to go along with it. There's all these traps in it that force people to adhere to it, at least, you know, give lip service to it. But it also, in my research, it empowers narcissistic sociopaths to just go right up to the top of the hierarchy and dictate everything. So how do you think that, and my perception is that actually most people are sane, but how do they come out and, you know, assert the will of sanity in this time?
Yeah. So no, I mean, I definitely see what you're saying. I think there's like two things. Is number one, Wesley Yang, like actually he's a great author. He wrote about like sort of like this meant the woke ideology and how it's basically been perfected to be this like hermetic, like self-contained, self-referential thing where like if you argue against it, it's like, why? It's like sort of like, why wouldn't you want to be a good person? Why wouldn't you do these things? And if anyone argues, then it's like the white fragility thing of, oh, you're just doing that because you're like frat, you know, whatever. And the funny thing is that I actually, so I still think, there's a lot of people who don't agree with this. But I do think, and this is actually terrifying, is that because the social pressure is so overwhelming, that there's a lot of people right now who are who are going to change their minds and basically be like, it's like 1984 zone where it's like, you know, I think differently, but like if so many people don't think the way I do, or at least aren't vocal about it, maybe I'm the one who's in the wrong. For example, like, and I'll make this quick, like my friend, someone reached out to her, my friend, she tweeted about like, you know, how she hated cancel culture. And someone reached out to her and was like, hey, you know, I said, you know, basically what happened is I tweeted that not all cops are bad because my brother is a cop. And the people who are doing this, these are, you know, these are two black women who are talking to each other. And she was like, when I said that not all cops are bad because my brother is a cop and I know he's not bad, he literally went in to change the system. All these people unfollowed me, told me I was evil, that I was setting back the revolution. And she was like, and you know what? Like, she was like, this is what she said. She said, I now understand why I was wrong and why I shouldn't have tweeted that. And I won't ever tweet something like that again. But I just want to let you know that when you know, I was canceled and it really hurt. And I was like, okay, the scary thing about what your friend said isn't that she was canceled. It's that she's now saying, I now understand why they did that to me and they were right. And I was like, that's the scary thing, is that this person legitimately changed her opinion because of the social shame. It's like history is written by the victors, right? It's like if we don't speak up, or if just people don't like really come at it with like a really like good faith, like godly, like truly compassionate, hard morality perspective, people are going to change their minds and really just be like, if I'm being canceled, it's because I did something wrong. And like, I love Big Brother now. And like, thank you guys for calling me out. I've seen that. You know what I'm saying? Is people really think that. That message that she sent to my friend was terrifying.
Wow. No, yeah, it's impossibly terrifying. And it's, to critique it, you're kind of butting up against conspiracy theory. Like I did an episode a couple days ago about this, these two guys having this dialogue on Zoom about, you know, anti-racist teaching. And one guy's black, one guy's white. And the black guy says, you know, the white guy's like, would you rather have a teacher that teaches your kid math and etc. and might be racist, or would you rather have an anti-racist teacher who might not be a good teacher? And the black guy says that, well, I would rather have the good teacher because you guys are basically irredeemable. Like there's no way that in my lifetime you're going to rid yourself of this toxic stain. And while Jesus, my Lord and Savior Jesus, demands that I love you, like I know that you will never be able to escape and stop history or end your participation in history. And it was so intensely, like if you replace that word white with any other group of people, it would be, you know, it would be outrageous. But we've been inoculated to just kind of accept that this one race will, you know, kind of accept all of the blame on the surface, but that leads to anybody who defends or doesn't agree with us is going to be put into this outcast zone. Like you really see the roots of genocide in this way of thinking. And it's so alarming, and they're so kind of blind to that aspect of this ideology when you really boil it down. And then put it under a pressure cooker of people in the streets who don't care about this, you know, educational theology or theory stuff. They want action right now, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I personally think if I've read stuff like Malcolm X's book, or I'm reading some and this might actually be, cause I noticed this isn't sort of like a popular opinion, just like overall, but, I do, you know, I follow like some like Nation of Islam stuff. Like I'm reading like Elijah Muhammad's like Theology of Time book, and like I do understand, you know, if someone's like super pissed off and they're just like, oh, you know, white people this and something like that. Like I get it. I personally, as sort of like if we're setting the rules of morality and someone's like, I hate all white people, like no, like that's not. And I usually notice though the people who say that, a lot of times like they're, in my experience, the people who are sort of like, and they did it like a thing of like the squad or whatever in Congress, it's like they all have like white boyfriends or white friend. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I do get, and I think white itself is actually like a terrible racial marker. I think that even just like the idea that like there's 4 or 5 categorizations of people on the census, you know what I'm saying? It's like okay, evil. Yeah. It's like in so many white people I know, it's like, they're immigrants, they're like Armenian, and it's just like, what even is like a white person? Yeah. And that's just like robbing people of like, you know, the diversity of experience. It's like Asian or something. I don't know. It's just not the predominant thing about me or anyone else.
Yeah. It's such a horrible storytelling tactic, too. I mean, there's no novel there. There's no character there. There's just these, and they even use the word bodies, like these protesters. They just reduce themselves into these like billiard balls that have no agency in and of themselves.
It's a really bad worldview to be totally obsessed with race. And I've been there. Like in college, I think I was more radical. Like I was definitely toying with it in the beginning. And then I would just be in certain spaces and I was like, you guys are jerks. Like, just because, like, you know, that girl's white didn't give you the right to steal her credit card and max it out. What I've seen, like, you know, some classmate was drunk, so someone took her wallet. And I was just like, I'll stand with you and, you know, you make jokes, whatever. Like I personally will be like, oh, you know, I'll make jokes about like white culture and like white people, stuff like that. But I'm not going to think that's cool to just like beat someone because they're white or something. I don't know. It's like, that's not real morality. That's not like what God wants. So
what made you inoculated, or what caused you to kind of de-radicalize or not be so leftist? What was it in your morality, in your philosophy, or in your character that caused you to go in a different direction?
Well, I think it's actually another thing that Wesley Yang said is that he said anyone who spent any amount of time in truly leftist spaces who's reasonable at all will often realize that it's not the move. It's like a very like deranged, like it's like I would just be in spaces and like certain groups would just start like arguing against each other. Going to college back then was tough enough. Going to college now, I can imagine, is true, just terrifying. I mean, and you just see it's like people just use social justice as a way to sort of like enact vengeance on the world for things that have nothing to do with social justice. And there's just all this sort of like psychic conflict that's going, like the classic thing when you go to like so I went to Columbia University. Again, that was like my dream school. You know, I come from like a public school in the Midwest. You know, I had no idea that most people there would be from like the coast, that, you know, most people there came from private schools, all this stuff. And I just felt like most people there were leftist because they grew up super rich. And in modern America, like no one wants to do that because we all fell in love with the Jay-Z like rags to riches story. So they use social because no one can know that you grew up rich in college, like at first sight. So people use social justice as like a way to like wring out this like psychic distress they have. And it's basically like, I grew up rich, but like no one knows that. So like, I'm just going to start saying like, I'm a victim and I'm oppressed and like, you're oppressing me and all this stuff. And it's just like really troubling. It's just like rich kids still being rich kids in like the worst way of like, everything's about me. I'm going to have a tantrum.
Yeah. So I'm just being exposed to that was enough.
Yeah, you just start to see like the actual psychological motivations for people is that this is about personal power. Not all. Like for a lot of people, whatever, do actually fighting the good fight. But for some, it's definitely about personal power, vengeance, and pettiness.
And how does that work out once it scales to an entire city being subjected to this faction like Portland is?
Well, that's the thing is that everyone was like, oh, those kids when I went to college 2012 to 2016, everyone was saying about us back then, those kids, they're going to go into the real world and then it's going to hit them. And all of us, all our class, we graduated, we hit the real world, and this is what's happening. Not we, because I'm not part of it, but like our generation, like we didn't just get into the real world and then like suddenly it was like a reality check. It's like we're actually out in the world now, and this is the result of when you just inculcate people and teach people these things. Of course, they're going to start acting like this in the real world and shape the real world fit what they think.
Yeah. So what do you think about the state of education then? Do you think that it's kind of a failed state in a way then, if this is what it is producing?
I think it could be. The only thing that gives hope is that I remember when we were kids, I grew up in the sort of like Puritan right culture, where it was like zero tolerance after 9/11. And we were taught things, you know, like just like sort of very like jingoistic and you know, all this stuff. And even it's like the yin yang, like even in the darkest dark, like there was light, because I think about my friends and we were reading like anarchist books and like listening to like band music and like doing things. And like, I just feel like no matter what, especially in the American spirit of like all Americans, it's like, even there's going to be kids who are like, it's going to be punk to sort of question what my teachers are saying and doing, and like what is really like my role, and someone give me this outside book. So
yeah. So with that thought there, if we do enter into a version of corporatized 1984, dystopia, do you think that it'll just be kind of a phase that'll be passed through and that just can't really cement itself? Do you think it's stable enough to really latch onto the culture and shape everything?
I think it could be. My two thoughts are about it is that, number one, thank God for the Second Amendment, because from what I understand in America, there will never be, because hard power is also in the hands of the people, the most totalitarianism we can get is soft totalitarianism, where people are shamed or maybe demonetized. They physically can't force large parts of the population to go into camps or go into that sort of thing. And I'm saying that as like a Jewish person. Like, I have a ton of family that died in the Holocaust. That's why I'm pro Second Amendment, is that you guys, you can become fascist, authoritarian, but it's going to be soft. It's never going to be hard stuff, because so much of this country is armed. I had one other point, but it slipped me.
This is a really weird question, but you might have thought about it. But I watched one video where a Chinese gentleman was saying that this is basically all funded by China, and that this is eventually benefiting China in the end, like our civil unrest and what's going on in our country. Do you ascribe to that? Do you think that there is a global kind of war being fought for the soul of America, or at least for the pocketbook?
I think like spiritually, like that, in like just the whole world. I mean, I think we're sliding towards sort of like an anti-democratic world order that could be like led by China. And of course, like it's in China's best interest. I don't know if they're physically pulling the strings, although I'm sure they're in some way facilitating the way Russia is. But yeah, I think that it's like this sort of slide might be like a McCarthy 10 years, or maybe it's just a troubled year, maybe 10 years. It also might be like a long sort of shift in history, and it's up to us to make sure the light doesn't go out. And that's actually the one other thing I did want to say, is that it seems to me that at least in the American system still, that one can make a go of it as a small business owner. And I've read stuff like the last hero is the small business owner, because the small business owner isn't subject to HR, isn't subject to corporate overlords. And I think it's really important for like all of us, of every color, of every whatever, like of every, basically any free individual, to try and get something of their own, some sort of small business, something to basically empower them to contribute to the economy and basically like be a hero. Because if we're subject to these corporations for everything, they can do whatever they want with us. Yeah. And my whole thing is just freedom, is anti-policing, anti-self-policing, all that stuff. So,
So put your if you believe in independence, then you have to be independent in a way. You have to put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, and I'm really into like hip hop. So like guys like Dame Dash and like Master P and stuff like that are always preaching like entrepreneurship, going your own way, and that's their way. I mean, they're talking about like fighting racism is like that's why I like Nation of Islam stuff, because I was reading Elijah Muhammad. He said you can have all the bullets and ballots, all the bullets you want, tear down all the statues. If you can't make your own toilet paper, you don't have a revolution. So it's just like economic self-sufficiency for everyone. I think would be great for us.
Wow. So. Great. Well, you know what? It's great to hear your thoughts on the troubled times, because it seems like you're being very realistic about how much trouble is on the horizon and out your front window, or your window there. But at the same time, there's a independent can-do attitude that I think that gives people hope. It gives people power. It places the people's power in their own agency, rather than having to submit to the mob or change the world by merging with a swarm in a way.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I try to encourage people, and I've always tried to, I guess, encourage people, is like, even for writers, like sometimes the advice I give them now is like, go and freelance at these places, maybe work in a newsroom, but if you can, like, start a blog of your own, just so you have a platform at the end of the day that you can publish anything you want, because that's freedom is the sweetest thing. The intellectual freedom and all that is physical freedom, not putting people in prison, all that is just the sweetest thing to humankind.
So what's on the horizon for Counter? What's your guys' plan? You guys going to do some gonzo video journalism too and podcasts?
So we're focusing on written word right now, but 100% video in like the near future. I'll keep you up to date personally. Like, definitely, I think there's some cool articles that you'd be interested in about stuff we talked about today. We're publishing tomorrow. It's a memoir by the guy who was the youngest field director in American political history for a campaign. He was Bernie's 2016 Minnesota field director. This guy's not a Democrat anymore. This guy identifies all the other way. And this was someone who was 20 years old running Bernie's Minnesota field operation. So in this article, we basically explain, he writes it, and I'm helping him edit it and stuff like that. What happened and why someone who was in a Democratic wunderkind left the Democratic Party.
Interesting. Like my tagline, I don't know anything about it, but it's like the story of somebody becoming a vegan by being exposed to too much sausage making or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. This is someone who cares about. I mean, he basically saw how the middle class in Middle America was gutted by like NAFTA and stuff like that, and it's more of like a globalist, anti-globalist zone. But yeah, I mean, we're in troubled times, but I mean, it's like we can still work out, we can still be healthy, we can still be personally excellent and get good at our crafts, and I think that's always and unlike a lot of these other places, we don't have to join like the Chinese Communist Party to do something in society. Like, I mean, we still can create our own websites and our magazines and our own businesses and all that. So. And
the more we exploit our freedom, the more we're going to ensure that it persists, because it is profitable for everybody around us to be accessing good media, good content, and good physical goods too.
Yeah. That's why I appreciate you doing your podcast. It's needed. I mean, everyone needs to speak up, like, and say what they think is the truth, because otherwise it's just going to get overridden co-opted by bad actors. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Zachary, for coming on my little show, and hopefully we can have more conversations like this and get the word out about your magazine.
For sure. I can, we'll definitely talk after this, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Congratulations for reaching the end of the podcast. If you enjoyed this product, consider donating to this channel via paypal.me/Benjamin Boyce or joining me on Patreon. Also follow me on Twitter at Benjamin A. Boyce. Have a good night.